We have reached the conclusion of this World Summit that has been extremely enriching, but do not think that it's going to mark the end of Women 20 activity. It's not going to be like this. So we will be very active in August, September, October, up to the moment in which there will be the declaration of leaders, because we want to provide all the tools needed, what was called the vital lymph from the Councilor Mattiolo, the G20, to strengthen precisely the strategy for gender equality. I'm here to draw the conclusions by really summarizing the basic aspects of our communiqué that has been passed just today. First of all, a general recommendation that it's embedded in the title of the communiqué itself. We no longer want to hear talking about inclusion when we talk about gender strategies. This is a fundamental element because women account for half of the world population. They are not a minority. We are already included. It's not a problem of inclusion, that of women. When you talk about gender equality, you have to refer to the empowerment of women. That is power, but not only that. It's being put in the right conditions to count, to be the protagonists and to rule, to be valorized for the richness of what women can actually provide. Women do not want to just take the bridles. They want to have more access to credit, more training, possibilities to count, to be rewarded for their credit. Unless they are not rewarded for that, they cannot go on. A higher level and a greater quality of work, as it was said by the Ministry of Labour, more social infrastructures. This shortage stands for a hurdle to the fulfillment of women's freedom, an alleviated family burden, more respect, less violence against women. All these aspects are tackled in the communiqué that we have passed. Some intersectional recommendations have been reported in the communiqué. First of all, gender equality has to be placed at the center of policies and budget decisions of the countries. Secondly, women shall have an equal weight at decision-making tables as men by 2030. And 2030 is, of course, the milestone for the Sustainable Development Agenda that targets at achieving these outcomes by 2030, because the diversity enriches policies. Third, we shall be in the condition to have gender-based statistics considering all the diversities for all trends, for not only data, but getting the impact gender analysis, considering also all the diversities for the policies that are devised by the G20 governments. The fifth, training. Training shall be put at the center to guarantee a giant leap forward for women. For this, Women 20 thinks that we have to counter, first of all, gender stereotypes, to zero down that component that is not voluntary. The gender stereotypes cannot be completely eliminated, but what we can do is to enable the right conditions so that they can be strongly restricted. The G20 shall follow this concrete proposal to define within the next 3 years plans against gender stereotypes in all G20 countries, and that these plans shall materialize through a lifelong learning approach that should be adjusted to the age of men and women, ranging from children to the university age, and so on, by testing the right tools to get action in this regard. And this is extremely important because it's a matter of focusing our attention on different topics from the culture for respect, equality, human rights, financial education, care, culture that shall be disseminated also to boys, the critical use of Internet and AI, and Women 20 asks a strong commitment to counter sexism. This action can make the difference in the long run, yes, but also in a mid-run, because if we start working since childhood and we act on school texts, we are going to see the results sooner. Health. Women 20 asks and believes that the pandemic let us understand that healthcare infrastructures have to be strengthened. They have to be strengthened both quantitatively and also qualitatively. Health stands for the most precious asset we have. Territorial services have to be improved for primary and secondary prevention, and all services, also those for sex and reproductive health, have to be consolidated. That's a pivotal issue for women. Telemedicine has to be developed, as well as services as the WHO is recommending for reproductive sexual health. As for vaccines, Women 20 recommends to follow the target to invest in research for heat-stable vaccines, because we have vast parts of the world where there's no electrical power, and this prevents women and children and men to access these vaccines, as vaccines have to be kept at very low temperatures, and in certain areas it's not even possible to have a fridge. So we need vaccines that have to be heat stable as a basic tool of equality. So we need to invest in research for heat stable vaccines. Up to date, this has not been done because in advanced countries this need was not felt, but the COVID-19 pandemic is teaching us that if we want to develop and distribute vaccines, we need to do that at a global scale, and we need to consider also this problem. Otherwise, women have to carry their children for kilometers walking to have them vaccinated. If we solve the problem for COVID in this regard, we are going to solve this problem also for other vaccines. So this would be an important step forward. And then sustainably developing a national strategic plan on gender-based medicine, investing on research, should take into account the differences in terms of the biological diversities in different genders for the prevention and most of all the treatment of the different diseases, because we know that both symptoms and the treatment and the use of certain drugs doesn't have the same effect on the health of men and women according to different diseases. So on this we need to strongly invest, and we as Women 20 can provide important professionals who in the G20 dealt with this topic and drafted different measures in a study commission that we have set up ad hoc that is coordinated by Professor Franconi. Business women and finance. We have a first very important commitment. The first thing we ask is that we need to guarantee equal rights of property and access to finance and investments, streamlining access, especially for small enterprises that are the most present and distributed for women. We have to allocate incentives for corporations to improve business quality, and we need to develop the public procurement. That's a key point, a new measure that we wanted to introduce this year, and we think that it should be tackled both with rewarding schemes for companies enhancing women's talents, more specifically those companies who have at least 40% of women represented at top positions in-house, and also investing 10% of the total turnover of public tenders, more specifically as regards women-led small and medium enterprises. We thought it was extremely important the outcome that was passed in the Ministers' of Economy Declaration in Venice of the G20 and the G7 as well. The assessment and introduction of this new global minimum tax of 15 points, that's considered of 15 points on the total income of multinationals. Let us think that out of these 15 points, at least 1 point should be the minimum to be dedicated and channeled especially for small and medium enterprises. This would be an important indicator of attention that has been devoted to consolidate small and medium enterprises infrastructure for women. As for the digital, we aim at the digital empowerment. In this regard, we are convinced that we need to develop digital citizenship and guarantee safe access and a wide use to all women and girls, eliminating all cost-related and safety-related obstacles, and promoting the use of internet also through mobile devices, mobile phones, and also devising in-depth ethical guidelines on a new approach to AI. And there we get to the core problem. We have to act on skills. It's not only a matter of knowing how to use these technologies, but to upgrade the level of skills of women. We need an upskilling and reskilling of women, and the presence of women is absolutely crucial in the teams working in AI. Otherwise, the transmission of gender stereotypes would be even larger, and the risk of this transmission is that these stereotypes are even further consolidated. The fight against cyber violence, it's a crucial issue. It's a form of emerging violence with which we have to come to terms, or identifying new tools for a digital space that is actually free and safe for all women. Let's talk about occupation. More jobs and qualitatively better positions. It was said at the ministry meeting in Catania, where we participated, I'd like to communicate that the interaction between Women 20 and the Minister of Occupation of Labour was very fruitful and constructive. Labour is the prerequisite of women empowerment. It's the condition that creates women financial independence and the possibility of being free to choose. We are interested in growth of women occupation, the increase in the financial independence of women. We care for bridging the gap with men, but not with their worsening, because a gap can be reduced also because men are worsening. Instead, we need to reduce the gap because women are improving, not because men are worsening. So you have to share a warning, and I've submitted this also at the ministry meetings tables. We have to be endowed with the right targets and the right indicators to reach these targets, because the goal of Brisbane is to approximative. We have to reach, and by now it has been done, so we have to achieve this target, but with two fundamental preconditions. First, that there is growth in female occupation and not unemployment, because the Brisbane goal, unfortunately, refers to active population, which is the sum of active and inactive workers. We can bridge the gender gap only by increasing female unemployment. You might easily understand that's not our goal. What we are interested in having an increase in women occupation. So first condition, achieving the Brisbane target, but with a growth in women occupation. Second, as I said, the gender gap that has to be reduced by 25% has to be decreased because women employment is increasing, and not because men employment is decreasing. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in a solution where women might get worse at the level of occupation. Men are even more undermined, and so the gap is reduced. This is why this is a rough indicator. And the next time, so we need to try and build indicators in a more targeted way, resorting to technical experts, because these rough indicators run the risk of distorting final results. But I share what is stated in the ministerial meetings report as a chair of Women 20, because it is going beyond Brisbane. So this going beyond Brisbane means that we are going to focus our attention on the growth in women employment and in reducing the gap thanks to this reduction. The pandemic has taught us that smart working has to be rule discipline. So we urge the countries to guarantee measures on security and work-life balance, including the right to being disconnected. These are all aspects that have to be put at the center after the pandemic once again. We need to adopt the measure against gender gap and gender pay segregation horizontally and vertically, activating positive action plans, and you will find this in the communique. If family work has to be redistributed in the couple with an extended use of parental leaves for both fathers and mothers, and the strong enhancement should occur at social infrastructure. That's a fundamental item that should be further developed. So we propose in our communique to allocate at least 2% of GDP according to the countries, precisely on the care economy. Children, the elderly, disabled, who are not independent would benefit as first, and so their rights would be further strengthened, and the burden of the family work for women would be mitigated. Violence against women, I'm really happy for the intervention that has been delivered by the Minister of Equal Opportunities, underlining how this aspect, so how she, representing the government, was committed to put this issue at among the most important priorities. We know that it's a structural phenomenon that testifies the man wanting to predominate and possess towards a woman. So it's difficult to be eradicated, and we need systematic policies that should be ongoing in the works of all governments. Women 20 thinks that it's fundamental to include in the roadmap a chapter on this, a very important part on violence against all forms of violences. We talked about cyber violence beforehand, harassment at work, and so we need absolutely to ratify the ILO convention that was already included in the declaration of the ministers in Catania. So every woman has to be entitled to live freely, free from violence, and the quality of services, of empowerment of women who are victims of violence is absolutely pivotal. So we need to increase public investments, to consolidate all private and public services and NGOs services that foster the self-determination of women, also considering the implications of violence on children and girls with a specific focus on orphans of feminicides. And then finally, the part concerning environmental sustainability, that's the final scope, last but not least in terms of its importance. As it was said, that's a huge opportunity that we can grasp. Women are the enablers of deep change in the areas of resource sustainability as a boost towards a society of well-being. That's a great opportunity that women can exploit in this ecological transition through the creation of new job opportunities. So it's very important to provide equal opportunities in green jobs, investing in education, upskilling, and reskilling of women. Another very important element that we underline, it's important to redesign and shape communities and cities that should be inclusive, keeping into account the needs of women, girls, and in terms of welfare and security, safety, lifestyles, also including public transportation and mobility solutions. Now, we expect a Rome Declaration that shall be strong on gender equality, so in an unprecedented way. Up to now, we didn't have it, so we have a huge opportunity. We are available for our G20 presidency. In this regard, we ask the leaders' declaration to enclose attachment with the roadmap on gender equality, and more specifically on, as for employment, the Councillor has already reassured us, so we are extremely happy. But we would hope that this enclosure, this annex, would count for a roadmap for gender equality 100%, as we did for the communique, as we have the 3 Ps as an objective: people, planet, and prosperity. It is already intrinsic the fact that this is going to be an unprecedented declaration on a global scale. So in this annex, we expect to have an annex with a roadmap, with a gender-based approach that would intersect this global approach. We expect also here a strong and interactive listening. We have 2 months ahead, so a strong listening on your behalf, representatives of the civil societies. The more the governments and the more the presidency of the G20 and the civil society manage to move on jointly, the more the role of women will be further enhanced in the intents and in the goals that we are setting, and the more the future will be brighter and pink for everyone. So, drawing my conclusions by saying that the strength of women is there, exists, and will be needed to change the world. We are here to serve the G20 100%. Please leverage our wealth. Thank you.